just wanting to give James an introduction here, because some of you will know if you've been around a while, but many of you won't have known that James has served Rev with regards to the whole thing of work and following Christ at work and work ethic and being inspired by God in work. He's served us for years and years, along with others, but he's really been a linchpin on this subject. But obviously I haven't spoken about it for a few years now, have you? So it's really great, because obviously over that time he would have grown, he himself would have matured. So we're really expectant that he's going to bring some really sharp and encouraging stuff for us this afternoon. So give it up for James Slater.
Yeah, well, a while ago I put on some events, but I never had the guts to actually stand up and be the speaker on this topic, right? Because I was still trying to work it all out. But yeah, coming up for having been in the workplace for 13 years now, and I have lots of reflections. I'm trying to hone my thinking around it, so I'm going to try and bring some of that today, and I hope I hope you find it useful. I'm really, really passionate about this topic, not just because I think the Bible has a lot to say about it, but because we spend most of our time working, right? I think it's probably roughly about half. If you think about how much time you're at work, travelling to and from work, and how much, as my wife often tells me, I'm sat there thinking about work, it can be quite all-consuming. So it's really important we face into it, and as whole life Christians that are trying to follow Jesus in every aspect of life, it's not just about Sundays and it's not just about Tuesday evenings. They're the things that help drive us, shape us, hone us. They're where we come together as a community to repent and struggle, right? But then we're out in the world and we've got to wrestle with this stuff. So what do I really want to get from today? I guess my hope is that you will walk in more freedom in your workplace. Okay, and I'm going to unpack that as we go through, right? Galatians 5 verse 1 says, "It was for freedom that Christ has set us free." And reflecting a little bit recently, I'm convinced, Romans 12, that our transformation begins with the renewal of the mind, and the renewal of the mind begins with understanding. So as we understand what God has to say about life and history and the grand story, and as we understand that, our minds get renewed and we transform, right? And so I guess what want to try and do today is give you a frame of reference to think about work. What is work all about as a Christian? And then, and hopefully that will bring you freedom. It will renew your mind. It will transform you. It will bring you freedom as you work. So that's the goal, and we'll come back to that at the end, and you can tell me whether we've achieved that or not. It's all right. So we're going to split today into kind of two parts, but not two halves. The first part is probably a bit longer. We'll punctuate it with lots of questions and discussions. But basically what I want to do is go through the grand narrative of the Bible, from creation right through to eternity, and look at what does the Bible have to say about us as workers. And then second, I want to just try and draw all those themes together and say, what are the practical application? What's the practical application for us in terms of our jobs, our work, our unpaid work, whatever it may be. To help us with discussion, and because I want to hear as much as possible from all of you, I'm going to use this tool called Mentimeter. I don't know if you've ever used it before, but it is a great way to get lots of feedback from lots of people. So, and we're going to use this as we go through, the first question I'd like to ask you need to get your mobile phones out, you need to go to menti.com, you need to type in the code that is at the top, 11579120. Simple question to start with, paid or unpaid, what do you do? What is your work? Whether it takes all week, or it's one day a week, or it's whatever, what work do you do, what industry do you work in? One of the things I will say is that each of you will have very specific situations. I'm going to talk quite generally about work, but I hope it will launch us into a conversation where we can get into specific applications as well. Don't know how to automate the scroll, but you can see here, wow, actors, pastors, unpaid various, Flip Garms. Anyone want to explain that? Church graphic designer, charity sector. Okay, next question. It should change on your phone. How do you feel about your work? Sometimes good, sometimes stressful. Finding fulfillment. Pays the bills, yeah. Good sometimes too much, important, mixed. Yeah, okay, so exhausting, sometimes rewarding. Yeah, so it's a bit of a mixed answer, right? Really interesting to see what people have said there. So, I mean, just to give you a little introduction on myself, my name's James, for those that I don't know. I do know most of you in the room. I'm a management consultant, which basically means that I spend my time, I specialise in the insurance industry. It's where you all switch off. I specialise in helping people in finance functions. You switch off again. And basically doing change programs. So new processes, reorganisations, technology implementation, just big change programs in finance functions and insurance companies. That's what I get involved in. And I have to say, 6 months in, having arrived in London, all excited about the impact I was going to make on the world, right? All these promises through your sort of young years and into university about the world's your oyster and all that kind of stuff. And 6 months in, I was totally confused. I was just like, what is the point in all of this? And what bearing, if any, does this have on eternity? And I sort of was a bit lost as a Christian, as a passionate Christian, as to what any of this meant. And so I started really what has been the last decade of reflecting on this topic and thinking about what my life at work looks like. And I guess 13 years on, I'm still there. It's not without its challenges. I don't always enjoy it, but I am full of faith in my work. And I feel a real sense of godly calling to the workplace that I'm in. So, just to plug very quickly, this is something we wrote, 5 or 6 years ago. When we did the last Faith at Work series, we wrote a book called Faith at Work, and it's basically a collection of stories, not too dissimilar to mine, that I've just told you, of people wrestling with what it meant to be in the workplace. There's all sorts of different stories in here, but you can get this on Amazon. It's only about £7. Steph's endorsed it. He says this really is a beautiful book, so it must be good. But yeah, get your hands on it. Not everyone is still in this church, but it's still some wonderful stories, and at some point we'll get them all back together 10, 20 years on and see what's changed, see what they've learned. Okay, so I want to dive in. Really what I want to do through this first part is give us a theological framework for work. Right, I want to look through the biblical narrative, and I think it's really important that we do that. Our culture today tells us that life is all about ourselves, right? We're all writing our own story. Truth is relevant, believe what you want, the source of happiness is within, hence the age of self-help books. We are told to carve out our own story. As Christians, though, we look to find our place in God's story, right? It's countercultural. It's not the way everybody thinks. We look to a shared truth. We look to understand our part in God's big story and then act accordingly. So it's key we understand the story, past, present and future, that we are part of and what that means for us. So what we're going to do is we are going to step through each of the 4 key periods in the Bible, right? Creation and fall. Okay, God's chosen people who are a prototype prophetic people. We're going to look at the inaugurated kingdom, right, which is the time in which we live now, which is the now and not yet. And then we're going to look at the consummated kingdom, i.e. when Jesus comes back and we are raised. And we're going to look at it through 5 lenses. If you thought this morning's sermon was intense, I'm just adding to it, right? Okay, so fill and multiply, we're going to look at that. We're going to look at rule and reign, we're going to look at hands in the dirt, we're going to look at rest to work, and we're going to look at kingdom and exile. Okay, makes sense? See where we're going? And what I'm going to do is we'll punctuate sort of between or in between these with questions, get you to talk in your groups, and then respond on the board with your thoughts and ideas, just so that we can get lots of thinking going. We will take a break, ideally after the first part, but if I've got glazed eyes, then we'll sort of break at some other time, and then we'll finish the story, and then I've got some practical application at the beginning. So let's get going then with creation and fall. Genesis chapter 1. If you've got Bibles, feel free to turn to Genesis chapter 1. So, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Okay? Probably all fairly familiar with this story, but God kicked things off, right? He's a creator God. He kicked things off. He set things in motion. And then we get to verse 28. So I'm sort of skipping the sort of 6 days of creation where he creates various different things. I'm assuming that there is familiarity with that in the room, but we get to verse 28 once he's created man in his own image, mankind in his own image, male and female he created them. We get to verse 28, and God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth. Two themes in that verse. The first is fill and multiply, right? And there's a procreative nature to that, or probably a focus. But I think there's a broader message to unpack, which is that God created the world with unbelievable potential, but he didn't create everything. So everything flows from God, but essentially he set the earth in motion. He's still in control, he's still sovereign. In Colossians it says that he upholds the earth by his very breath, right? Genesis 1, by his word he created everything, but he didn't create everything, right? So he has created in us talent, skills, capabilities, and he has created in the world a set of raw materials which when combined means the world is going to flourish. And I think that's remarkable, right? So the world flourishes through procreation, but it also flourishes through our work. And we are called to fill and multiply. The second point then is that he calls us to rule and reign, right? So be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth, and then subdue it and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens, etc., etc. So God has created us to reign with him. We are his kings and queens on earth. And I think, by extension, work is then part of our unique responsibility to rule with him. Right? Key word, with him. He's in charge, he's sovereign, but we rule with him. He's given us dominion to subdue it, to have dominion over the fish of the sea, etc., etc. That's not to say he's lazy. I've already alluded to the Colossians verse that he's in control, he's sovereign, but it's not to say that it is to say that he's not a micromanager. He's involved, but he has given us a level of freedom to combine our talents with the raw materials of the earth and let the world flourish. And I think that is really, really important, and for me has given me fresh purpose, or a fresh sense of purpose. Again, fill and multiply and rule and reign. I'm going to come back to these themes. They are throughout Scripture. Then we come to Genesis 2, right? So we get to the end of the first creation story, and we come into the second creation story, which, if you like, he's created man and woman. He's kind of zooming in on that part of the story and unpacking that in a bit more detail. And we see in Genesis 2 verse 7, it says, Genesis 2 verse 7, then the Lord God formed the man from dust, man of dust from the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living creature. And I don't really want to say anything more than God had his hands in the dirt. Okay? And we'll come back to that theme as we go. But he created man out of the ground. And then it goes on, and we have our sort of first and probably more explicit command for Adam, as we pick it up in verse 15, where it says, the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to keep it. To work it, to serve it in such a way that it would flourish. Fill and multiply, right? But to keep it, or to protect it, i.e. to rule and reign over it. This is the first thing that God calls Adam to do. And I think it affirms the truth that work is at the very heart of who God has created us to be. It is part of our human dignity. we live to work rather than we work to live. I don't know how many of your colleagues would probably say the latter, right? There was a comment on there about paying the bills, right? It does, that's a part of it. But work is really at the heart of who we are, who God has made us to be, and we flourish in it. But to complete the story, and to go back a few verses, because again, chapter 2 is just to zoom in on the grand narrative. If we were to look at, I've lost it. I didn't write it down. The end of chapter 1, somewhere, or maybe it's in chapter 2. Yeah, so God blessed so verse 3 of chapter 2. So God blessed the seventh day, made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. So here we find that rest is part of the creative order. My fourth theme, rest is part of the creative order. Now I don't know about you, but I probably do my best thinking on about day 7 of a sun-soaked holiday, of a 2-week holiday, lying on a sun lounger, having read some books and stared into space and generally switched off, right? Rest is part of the creative order. We do our best thinking when we've had time out. Writer's block, anyone? Right? We rest to work. That theme I'm going to repeat as we go. Finally, God delights in what he has made. I think verse 31, God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. It's almost like he did know it was going to be good, but it was almost like he didn't know it was going to be good. He's like, wow, this is actually really good. It wasn't just functional or useful. It was good, excellent, beautiful, and clearly a pleasure to behold. And we too should look to create wonderful things and then celebrate the good things that we have done. So there you have it. God has created the world. He has established his kingdom. He is the sovereign creator God, and his people, all 2 of them, rule alongside him to take what he has done and make it flourish forevermore. The first kingdom. So, my question to you, and you can talk in your groups as you respond to this. What inspires you most from what I've just said? What inspires you most from the creation story? And we'll give you 5 minutes to do that, and then we'll pick the story up and keep going.